Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Angela Maxwell. I am the Director of Prevention and Early Intervention Services with Alcohol and Drug Services. We are truly excited to have you all join us this evening in what we would consider a very important topic for discussion during this COVID-19 pandemic. And that is the issue of underage drinking. I will serve as your moderator, so I'm going to be the one who help us flow through this town hall meeting this evening. Before we get started, I would like to do a couple of housekeeping issues. One, the town hall meeting is being recorded. Secondly, we would love to get your feedback as well as your questions throughout the town hall meeting, either in the question and answer section of the Zoom or the chat feature. So please feel free to comment and share your thoughts throughout this town hall meeting. We do have individuals who are monitoring the chat box and the Q&A box. So we will address your comments and your questions throughout the town hall meeting. Also, I would like to thank our event hosts, which are UNC Greensboro, Healthy Gifford Coalition, Alcohol and Drug Services, as well as SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, who is supporting us through stipends and town hall, stipends to support the town hall. So we really appreciate SAMHSA's support in this evening's event. I am going to transition us to our opening speaker, who is Dr. Brett Carter. Dr. Carter is the Associate Vice Chancellor and Dean of Students at UNC Greensboro. He has been involved in higher education for over 30 years. He is responsible for a wide range of student affairs functions, including the Dean of Students Office, Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities, Offices of Accessibility Resources and Services, Military Affiliated Services, Counseling Center, Campus Recreation and Wellness, and Student Health Services. He has a long history of diverse work experiences with student housing, judicial and academic integrity programs, student support services, first-year experience programs, and crisis management. We are truly excited to hear from Dr. Carter, and at this time, I will turn it over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Maxwell. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this virtual town hall meeting titled tonight, Students' Voices, COVID's Impact on Underage Drinking. Now, I would like to thank each of you for joining us tonight as we address this very important topic through a candid conversation with students, educators, public health professionals, and some of the country's leading experts on alcohol and other substance use prevention. Now, there's no doubt that COVID-19 pandemic has affected every family across the country and will have a long-lasting impact on public health and well-being for years to come. And so there have been many media reports about how the increased stress and uncertainty of COVID-19 has led to an increasing issues related to mental health and substance abuse or substance use. And when it comes to college drinking, the reports have fluctuated. But the one thing we know about college drinking and these reports is that underage drinking and college student drinking continues to be a top priority for schools around the country. Now, our efforts to help students control their drinking and make good choices are obviously impacted by the social distancing and the remote learning that has kept many of us off a campus, as well as outside of our physical spaces in school buildings. And so with that being said, tonight's town hall meeting is an opportunity for the community to hear direct from our students and to learn firsthand what the past 13 months have been like for them. Now, we will all engage in dialogue about the impact of COVID-19 has had on, they will all engage us about their impact in terms of how the COVID has impacted their academic experiences, their home life, their social life, in relations to underage and high-risk drinking. It is our hope that your participation this evening will award you with a better understanding of alcohol access and the usage for youth and young adults in this season of COVID. So our event tonight lends itself for voices to be heard, ideas to be shared, and action steps to be taken to ensure that we are all promoting the message that is reflective of our care for our community and our goals to collectively support the safety and well-being of our students of all ages. Now, it's likely that each of you will have, you who have logged in tonight on tonight's town hall, have done so because you have a vested interest in understanding the issues of underage and problem drinking, whether that is from the perspective of as a parent, a professional, or perhaps your personal experiences. But regardless, what we draw you to this evening or to tonight is that each of you brings a valuable component to the conversation of prevention, education, and action. And so with that being said, I'd like to emphasize the importance that bringing us all together to share our individual ideas and experiences has in creating a large, more comprehensive narrative around these very important issues. So it's within this inclusive community that working together that we can shift the narrative from questions to answers and from concerns to solutions. So again, I thank you all for joining us tonight for this virtual town hall meeting, and I encourage you to share your thoughts, ask questions, listen to others, and be open to the possibilities that may present themselves as we explore how all members of our community, all members of this community, can be agents of change in a culture of underage and problematic drinking. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to learning some valuable information in tonight's events. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carter, for your words during your opening speech. I agree that this discussion tonight creates an opportunity for us to address issues or identify issues related to prevention, education, and action. I think I truly love the last word, which is action. You know, we speculate a lot. We read the data, which you alluded to, is inconclusive at this time as it relates to how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted underage drinking. So some studies show that it has increased, some has decreased, but we're too early into this pandemic to fully understand the impact of COVID-19 on underage drinking. But what we do know is that underage drinking remains a critical issue among those who are under the age of 21, whether it's among college students or those younger. And so this continues to be a very critical topic. Alcohol continues to be the most commonly used substance among young people. And even though we are faced with the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the opioid crisis. And then some are also focused on the issue of the cannabis push to legalize and decriminalize marijuana or cannabis. Alcohol continues to be the most prevalent issue among our young people. And so tonight's panelists represent a diverse group of individuals who will help us hopefully gain more information, but also spark within us an excitement or an energy around addressing this issue, move us towards more action. And so at this time, I would love to introduce our panelists. And I'm going to start with Tiana Gregory. Tiana Gregory is the Alcohol and Other Drug Coordinator for UNC Greensboro's Counseling Center. She is a licensed clinical social worker and a licensed clinical addiction specialist in the state of North Carolina. She has been a therapist for 10 years with a primary focus in substance use disorders. Prior to entering the higher education realm, she spent the vast majority of her career working as a clinician and later director of an inpatient substance abuse treatment facility. She's a proud alumna of North Carolina Agricultural Technical State University, where she received her BSW and completed her MSW through the Joint Masters of Social Work program with A&T and UNC Greensboro. Thank you, Ms. Gregory, for joining us. We also have Taisha Terry. Taisha is the Substance Use and Violence Prevention Coordinator of UNC Greensboro. Taisha has over 6 years of experience developing and implementing health promotion initiatives that address violence and unintentional injury. She has a diverse background working in college health promotion and community-based interventions. She has played a leading role in efforts to address substance misuse through strategies that target harm reduction and providing training and public awareness. Next, we have Jacqueline Sandoval. Jackie is a fourth year undergraduate student at UNC Greensboro, majoring in public health education with a minor in Spanish. She's an intern with the Center for Student Wellbeing at UNCG and enjoys connecting with college students and serving as a resource on campus. Next, we have Nene Asi. Nene is a second year master's in public health student at UNC Greensboro. She currently serves as a graduate assistant for the Center for Student Wellbeing at Kaplan. Her passions include reproductive injustice and Black maternal disparities and taking care of her plants. Next, we have Tyler Yates. Tyler is currently a senior in the undergraduate social work program at UNC Greensboro. He is also currently registered as a certified alcohol drug counselor intern. Tyler started working with GC Stop as a volunteer in 2018 and has since worked as the Justice Involved Program Coordinator and currently serves as the Syringe Service Program. He has been a part of the North Carolina Collegiate Recovery Leadership Academy, Health Policy Academy, the National Collegiate Recovery Leadership Academy, and served as student intern with SAFE Project. We also have with us on the panel, Keaton Glenn. Keaton is a senior at UNCG, and he joined the Spartan Recovery Program during the pandemic back in December 2020. I would also like to highlight that they are highlighted as our official panelists, but we also have joining us individuals who are professionals in the substance use prevention field, as well as substance use treatment field from the community. And that is Jackie Butler, who's the Chief Operating Officer with Alcohol and Drug Services. We also have Sage Chioma, who is the project coordinator in the prevention department with Alcohol and Drug Services. And we have Calandra Lewis, who is the coordinator for Healthy Giver Coalition. And she's also helping to monitor our chat and QA box for us this evening. So we are truly excited for our very comprehensive and dynamic panelists. And I'm just gonna jump straight into our questions. And so panelists, I will tell you some of these questions. I have some of your names directly beside our questions, and I may call on you specifically, but I encourage all of you all, if you feel that you are want to respond to a question, feel free to chime in. We want this to be a dialogue and engage in discussion over the next 45 minutes to an hour. And so the first question I have designated for Tiana. And if you will, Tiana, if you can share with us, what does the data show as it relates to alcohol use pre-COVID and post-COVID as it relates to underage drinking, if you have that information?
Hi, and thank you, Dr. Angela. So the results, based on what we have in the Counseling Center and with our program where we get like sanctions and things like that from underage drinking on campus, it shows very similar to what you guys are saying, like very inconclusive. So it's still, we need time to kind of see what it does. But for the most part, what we see is that there's a decrease. And there's so many reasons behind why we see a decrease for campus, mostly because the students aren't there. So the data is received based on like sanctions on campus for students who got violations and things like that. A lot of students aren't there. So the number one reason we see the decrease is because of that. There's not a lot of partying and stuff going on because of social distancing and things like that. So right now, that's what the numbers show from our data specific to UNCG. Nationally, I think you would see the same things. It's either an even kill from prior to COVID, or it shows a decrease. And I think that's because the gatherings they don't have access to each other, to the partying and things that promote underage drinking right now.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else want to respond to the question as well? We know that that definitely makes sense as it relates to college life and being on campus. If there are fewer students, there are going to be fewer sanctions on campus as it relates to underage drinking, as well as the social distancing factors as it relates to underage drinking. I'm going to ask Sage or Calandra if you all would like to respond from the perspective of our younger students as it relates to underage drinking, and if we see an increase or decrease, or what factors may contribute to that.
Landra, would you like to answer that? I can just say, I can say a few words about lifestyles, which is one of the programs that Alcohol Drug Services offers to the community through Guilford County Schools. So we're noticing that high school students are coming in with more issues that would make them actually at a higher risk. So they are coming in and they are in the assessment portraying symptoms that are depression or anxiety. And we know that trauma is something that we can look at from many different perspectives. And this past year has caused a lot of trauma, which most people want to medicate.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm glad that you mentioned depression, because my next question speaks to that. And so, Ms. Gregory, how many students have reported issues related to depression in the counseling center during the pandemic? And do you see this as a potential risk factor as well for college age students as it relates to self-medicating to address depression?
So that question was a little tough to answer quantitatively, so I'm gonna answer it kind of qualitatively. But when students come into the counseling center, we measure their report of depression on what we call a CCAPS, which is our counseling center assessment of psychological symptoms. So that's what they report when they come in, like, you know, each time it measures things like depression, anxiety, academic concerns, distress, things like that. Based on those results are subjective. So students answer those questions based on their understanding of what depression is, what anxiety is, and it may differ down the line from what the provider actually can diagnose as depression or anxiety. Surprisingly, the numbers nationally as well as within the counseling center kind of stayed the same. There were some subtle changes, but the subtlety in the changes were the reasonings behind the depression. So things like, you know, now I'm feeling depressed because I'm isolated, or I'm fearful of the pandemic, or I'm having increased situations with my family because I'm at home all the time. So that's the difference we saw, is the subtle difference in the symptom or the reason for the depression. There wasn't a major spike in the depression numbers themselves. They kind of were level. But where you did see a lot of increase in concerns is academically, of course. It jumped because of remote learning. There was a big jump in like eating concerns because you're home. And then family stressors like conflict and stuff between families. So that's where you did see a jump. But again, that information is subjective to the students feeling and how they feel. And what was the second part about risk factors?
So yes, do you consider depression as a risk factor for students self-medicating with alcohol to address that issue?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the number one reasons we see with underage drinking, besides the peer influence, is not wanting to feel. So, most people who develop, alcohol or other drug dependence, they have usually a mental health disorder associated with that. So 9 times out of 10, they're using to minimize the side effects to that diagnosis or yeah.
Okay, thank you so very much. I'm going to expand this question around alcohol use from a qualitative anecdotal, what we see in the streets conversation to our students. And so what is your experience as a student, and anyone can chime in as it relates to what do you see among your peers as it relates to alcohol use pre-COVID-19 and during COVID-19?
I guess I'll go ahead and jump in. Thank you all for inviting me. I'm really grateful to be a part of this. I love the answer that Tiana just gave about mental health. I can speak from personal experience. A lot of my substance use was related to my mental health. Once I got into recovery this time, I started noticing that in the spring and in the fall, I was getting very, very depressed, and I was getting more anxiety. And I, finally decided to start taking some medication that was prescribed by a doctor, and lo and behold, that medication worked. And it's really helped me recognize how much correlation there was between my substance use and my mental health. As far as alcohol use goes among my peers, most of my friends that consume alcohol, they've done so in moderation. I haven't really seen an increase in that peer group in substance use. But what I can say as a professional working in the field of substance use is that I've seen a large increase in the amount of overdoses in Guilford County. I can speak specifically for Greensboro. Overdoses on opioids are up 100% compared to this time last year. And I think a lot of that goes back to the things that have been discussed, the isolation and the alienation. Folks are by themselves, they're very, very anxious. This past year has been very traumatizing for a lot of people. And one of the best ways to do that is substances. They change the way that you feel. And unfortunately, when we mix those factors in with a poison drug supply, and we see the increase in overdoses that we're seeing now.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to chime in?
Yeah, so one of the things that came to my mind was just thinking about how sometimes drinking can create this sense of it's very much a social thing for some students at times, and it may create some camaraderie or some bonding, and so that's kind of what I'm thinking of. And I serve as a residential advisor for the apartment style dorms here on campus. And so unfortunately, I did have to bust some parties and talk to students about how that underage drinking is a violation, and I did have to document it. So it wasn't a fun conversation to have, but I did offer my support and connect them to resources when they needed it. But it seemed like after conversing with them and getting their side of their story, it seemed like they just wanted to do something fun during the pandemic, and with their roommates they would be drinking, just socially, casually playing games. And so it seemed like maybe they just wanted something to do from what I heard, but that's one factor I can think of. So yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like, it was a part of a social outlet, right? So just that social gathering, probably connected to what we've heard before from Tyler and Tiana around the trauma and the stresses, and even Sage of the pandemic, and the need to identify a way to express that, to get out of that space of dealing with the pandemic and social isolation and the traumas related to. For many of us last year, we left school on a Friday, left work on a Friday, and over just literally from Friday to Saturday, life changed for many of us, right? So particularly in the state of North Carolina, with the governor shutting everything down over the course of a weekend for schools, and then over the course of a couple of weeks for the state as it relates to businesses and things of that nature. So can definitely see how students are trying to identify ways to deal with those stressors. And thank you for offering, although it was uncomfortable for you, offering supports for them as well, which is a key part of the work in supporting students. So I believe we have a question in the chat box if we would like to entertain that question now. I believe someone said that there was a hand raised or there was a question in the chat box.
Yes, so Ms. Claudia Marini, I have just offered you permission to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Is Ms. Claudia joining us? Maybe she's trying to figure out her audio. Okay, we're gonna go to the next question. As soon as, if you're able to join us with your question, Ms. Marini, we would definitely love to hear from you. So for our students, there are a number of factors that influence a young person's decision to drink. Share your thoughts on factors that influence underage drinking during the pandemic. And we've already mentioned some of them. Of course, we talked about mental health, depression, but are there other factors that can influence a young person's decision to drink during the pandemic?
If I may say something,
Yes.
I'd like to say when children are isolated and they just have the electronics to rely on, we have to say, like one young lady said, well, as long as I have my Netflix, I can stay in, I'm okay. And we have to be mindful that a lot of images that are in movies and films and media right now really glamorize alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that influence because isolated also, they are locked in with their video games and they're actually not in the room alone. They're in the room with other people who are outside of that environment. So that's a great influence because when I'm watching, I notice a lot of behaviors. I think it's a teen program. And then I notice a lot of adult inappropriate behavior in that particular film.
Okay. So media and social media, thank you. Other factors. Yes.
I was going to add to that and say, I know it's for the students, but like TikTok is a huge thing and was a huge thing over the pandemic. And there's a lot of challenges associated with TikToks and doing things like that. So definitely a heavy influence on underage students who want to participate, who are bored, who want to gain popularity and things like that. So
okay, so TikTok.
Absolutely. And I just want to chime in and kind of mimic what Tiana has already mentioned. Definitely TikTok and social media definitely have influence on how much underage drinkers drink. And so back during the pandemic, there was a take a shot, maybe not challenge. And so when you saw a person take a shot on social media, no matter who it was, you didn't have to know that person. That was their cue to take a shot as well. And so I think definitely boredom and social media definitely impacted alcohol usage among underage drinkers during the pandemic.
Okay. So we have social media TikTok challenges. We're calling out TikTok, but I'm pretty sure there were challenges elsewhere in the social media realm. Are there other factors?
Yeah, I like to throw in my 2 cents as a parent on the scene as well. I think that access to alcohol, actually just being home, has certainly increased for our young folks as well. And I know just in my own peer pressures as a grown adult, you know, being invited to all of these virtual happy hours and this virtual this and this virtual that. So I've gotten to the point where I make sure that I have a glass just so that I can look the part when I attend all of these virtual events. And so while parents are, you know, doing what they do, we've all, you know, seen the jokes and the memes of what's really in that coffee mug, right? While they're out there. I was about to pick up my coffee mug, but no, it shouldn't still be sitting on the desk at 6, 7 o'clock. But, you know, we've all seen the jokes and the memes, but the reality is that we know that adults are drinking more throughout this pandemic. And so if adults are drinking more and they're obviously keeping the stock in the house, then guess who has more access? Their children. And so, you know, we started off in the beginning just talking about how the numbers on campus, you know, really don't reflect the increase. While there are some campuses that reported that there are, we know that our students are not here. So we don't really know what's going on, and we don't have that insight of what's going on at home. And I would bet, I can more than bet, because I have 3 students, you know, 2 who came on home, 3 who came home as a result of COVID. And so I see what the activity is like. And, you know, for me, 2 of mine are of age. And, you know, I had to really deal with some stuff like, okay, I have an adult daughter who just put a pack of wine coolers in the refrigerator. I had to deal with that, right? So what I'm saying is that the access is there, the usage is more. And so these young people who are in the home with these people obviously have access to a little bit more as well. And so that'd be my own anecdotal info.
Absolutely. I would like to add to that, because an article that you actually shared, Dr. Luter, around that says a study finds students' drinking habits changed during COVID-19. There are a couple of interesting points in the Journal of Studies on Alcohol and Drugs. It actually said that the biggest change in drinking habits changed for students who moved off campus. And 2 of the nuggets have to do with being home. So it said that students who continue to live with their parents through the campus closures also reported an increase in the number of days they drank per week, rising from 2 days per week to 3.3 days per week. And then it also says that the number of students who stayed at home increased, who were already at home pre-COVID, reported increased number of days that they drank per week. And I would venture to say that it has to do with what you alluded to earlier, which is parents are drinking more often, which means there's more alcohol available in the home. But then also when we look at the closures, at least in the state of North Carolina, during the closures of restaurants and bars, we also know that the ABC stores were allowed to stay open. And there was a justifiable reason for that, as it relates to trying to reduce the number of individuals who are visiting our emergency departments. So to minimize those who are entering the ER or the ED due to alcohol withdrawal related issues, the ABC stores were allowed to stay open. But that meant that there was ongoing access of those type of alcoholic beverages within individuals' homes. So I thought I'd bring that up because as you were talking, I was just like, wow, I'm sitting here looking at this data point that says students who are at home with their parents report more drinking days at home. And so I guess we can maybe share the link in the chat box for anyone who may want to look at that. And that's the Wiley online article that you shared earlier. with me. I'm Dr. Luter.
And I can certainly share that with the panelists. And I will say one other little thing also is that they may be drinking more and they're probably drinking better. And again, I just look at my own household and I know my husband brags on his stock. You know, he don't just have the cheap liquor here. And so now our students are home and they've got the opportunity to dip into that stock. And so it's just, you know, now they've got a taste for bourbon that they never would have had, you know, while hanging out in the dorm. So I think this is also a concern that, you know, we need to think about. Parents need to think about that, you know, because when it's just us, you know, we're adults, we're grown, we've handled all of that, but we have to be mindful of what we are exposing our, you know, young adult children to as well. And just kind of being mindful about that, you know, because we're stocking up and you're putting things in there and not paying attention to how much of it is gone because you're drinking more, because you're not going out. And that's another thought. It's just, we've been teaching all these years about being responsible and not being, you know, in places and drinking in safe places. So now you've got young people at home and they're hanging out online with their friends and having these virtual parties. And to them, they're in a safe place. They're home. They're not getting in the car. They're not somewhere where they have to worry about someone sexually assaulting them or other things that you may think about while you're out and that may help you drink less. But now you're home and you've got this opportunity and you can convince yourself that it's okay to drink more because I'm home. I'm not going anywhere and I can't hurt anybody. So.
Right. And I believe that's where the educational piece comes in as it relates to increasing parents, young adults, as well as the general community's awareness around safety as it relates to driving is not the only risk factor associated with underage drinking, right? And so, you know, just being able to increase the community's awareness around, granted, we're not driving as much, even though we're opening up more now. You know, we also have to be mindful of the other physical aspects related to underage drinking and the risk associated with drinking, period, unintentional injuries and things of that nature that can happen within the home. So I'm going to follow this conversation up with what can family members and friends do if they are concerned about underage youth drinking?
Well, one thing I want to say that's really important, if they have any signs and symptoms that it's actually happening, of course, seek help. I'm sure Tiana and other substance abuse professionals will agree. Biopsychosocial helps to get the person somewhere as soon as you can so that you can assess if it really is problematic or if they're just in the experimental stage. But as a prevention person, I'm really concerned about, to piggyback on what everyone else said, is how our culture glamorizes alcoholism in such a way that every time I turn on the TV, I see very wealthy people or people who have jobs actually drinking on the job. Like I'm a soap opera baby, right? So you would see in the middle of the day, there's a business meeting and they just open up something and have a drink. And so there's this culture that we have, and parallel to that is not emphasizing and teaching people about trauma, because before the child gets to medicating themselves, there might be indications that there's something going on with them. And I say that because we've heard of the ACE, which is adverse childhood experiences. Well, all of our children are now having adverse childhood experiences because of this past year. So that's to piggyback off of what Tyler Yates said about the level of trauma of 2020. So that's important. So there's adverse community experiences that some parents are too busy and they're ignoring, whether it's the news frightening our children or whether it's the way they're treated based on certain things systemically that parents might not be aware of, but it could lead to them wanting to self-medicate and escape. I see Jacqueline shaking her head.
And so I'm glad that you mentioned Jacqueline's name. I'm not going to call on her at this moment, but I would love to hear from all of our students around this specific question. What is it that, from your perspective, that a family member or friend can do if they're concerned about their friends or their child's drinking?
I would love to add. Thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here. So in my experience, if I were to have someone come up to me in the heyday of what I called my using, I probably would have told them to go away. And so it's very important how that conversation is structured. And for me, I was at a point where I could tell the person who was inquiring about my depression, some of my anxiety, just wanted me to talk. And so I think that it's very important to try to just be their friend in that moment, because it can go south very quickly, because most of the time I didn't want to admit that I had problems with drugs and alcohol. So it's a very, very fragile conversation. But in my experience, I wanted to open up. I wanted someone to listen. And so just having the good active listening skills, asking open-ended questions, making sure you let that person know that you're there for them and that it's going to be okay. Because in my experience, I didn't know any other way. And so just being their friend and reassuring them that it's going to be okay.
Okay, definitely being a peer support during that time frame. Absolutely.
Hi, I definitely want to piggyback off of Keaton. That was an amazing response. I would definitely say if I were in those shoes and I had to confront someone I was worried about, I would just definitely start with the caring conversation, just letting them know that I cared about them and that I noticed something that was going on. And if they wanted to talk, I really like how Keaton said, just use open-ended questions instead of ones that would insinuate things, because you never know what's going on with someone. So I really like that response as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And so from Taisha and Tiana, from a campus perspective, what is it that students can do if they're concerned about their friends drinking?
Taisha, you want to go first? Or me?
Yeah, I'm fine. I was just making sure. I was trying not to over talk you, Tiana. But Angela, I want to go back a question. I know we asked what family and friends could do for those who are underage drinkers, but I just wanted to speak from like a preventionist standpoint and working at the university. I think we do a good job of developing programs that intentionally show students that they can have fun without the presence of alcohol. And I think continuing to be able to host those programs for students and inviting students to those programs and showing them that, you don't have to have a drink to turn up, to have fun, to be social at parties or with your friends. You can just simply be you. If you're the life of the party, you're going to be the life of the party, regardless if alcohol is present or not. So I'm thankful to be in this position and to work alongside Dr. Luter to be able to offer students these types of programs. I feel like sometimes our programs also help with students, mental health concerns, whether it be anxiety or depression. But I just wanted to throw that in there, that from a campus perspective. But for us, we most certainly refer our students to the counseling center. And I'll let Tiana speak more to that. But students are more than welcome to come and see Dr. Luter, myself, or other health educators in the Center for Student Wellbeing at the Kaplan Center at UNCG. And I'm sure other universities have a wellness or well-being center that students can also go and talk to some of their health educators. The Dean of Students Office is also, and Brett might can talk, Dr. Carter might can talk towards that a little more, but the Dean of Students Office is also available to students and provide them with resources to support their needs. And so Tiana, I'll turn it over to you from the counseling center's perspective.
Thank you, Taisha. So yeah, she pointed out a lot of the other resources before you get to us. But yeah, expressing concern to anybody, a faculty member, staff member, who will in turn 9 times out of 10 send you to us. So you may end up with me, or you can just, make a phone call to the counseling center, and they would put you with me, and I would complete an assessment, of course, and ask some questions that are very, easy and not threatening in any manner, just to kind of see. I also provide a lot of psychoeducation to students, just to give them feedback, because a lot of students aren't really aware of what things like alcohol and marijuana and stuff do to their bodies. And sometimes just them knowing, we were talking about like the culture, I think Sage said it, and college prevents that opportunity for students to drink. They're excited for that freedom and that social acceptance of, oh, I get to drink. So yes, all the resources Taisha mentioned, which would lead to me for the counseling center.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'm going to, Taisha led us into this piece as far as the prevention services and strategies that are available for students. And of course, we understand that with prevention, the goal is to reduce the impact of substance use among our young people, but ultimately try to prevent that behavior overall. And if that's not possible, we are blessed and fortunate to have access to treatment services through the counseling center. Within the community, of course, we know that there are various treatment providers that are available for adolescents as well. From a prevention perspective, and Calandra and Sage, if you would like to join in this piece of the conversation, we offer educational prevention services for young people. We do that for kindergarten all the way up to college age students. But specifically, we also provide parent education programs for members of our community. And that does include how parents can reduce access and the risk associated with underage drinking for their children. And then we also work, as Sage mentioned earlier, with the school system, providing educational programs for our elementary, middle, and high school students. Specifically with our high school students, we do address underage drinking. A lot of that is done virtually now because schools are not allowing us in, but we do make that available for them. For students who are referred to us due to a violation of the school system's drug policy, we provide a brief screening to identify what their primary issues are. And if we identify a young person that has a need for further assessment for possible treatment, we link them to an appropriate agency that can meet that need. And so just wanted to share that. So in addition to on-campus resources, there are also off-campus resources that can support college age students, but also high school age students who are concerned about maybe their own drinking, but that of a friend, or for a family member who may be concerned about a young person's drinking. To our students, I would like to ask the question this way. What underage drinking strategies or tactics do you think would address the unique needs of students? So when we think about prevention messaging, when we think about prevention programs, what do you think students need that will help, address their underage drinking behaviors or the risk factors associated with that?
So I want to touch on a couple things. Sage said something earlier that I think is really huge, and a big piece of this is just how encouraged alcohol use is on college campuses. Luckily, UNCG has an amazing collegiate recovery program that folks can go to if they're in recovery or they're considering recovery. But the messaging that we use for alcohol is so much different than that of other drugs. Imagine cutting your TV on and seeing a commercial for methamphetamine or for cocaine or something else. There would be outrage. So I think the messaging is a huge piece of that. But as far as prevention goes, and preventing harms associated with the the substance use and the alcohol use. A big piece of that is just kind of increasing awareness about moderation, safety tactics, not drinking and driving, and then also, increasing access to resources at the school. That's kind of hard with COVID going on right now. But having access to the Kaplan Center to work out, or being able to go out on hikes with certain groups of people. I think those are all really vital in preventing substance use and misuse.
Okay.
Like Tyler said, just having programs that promote prevention is really important. At the Center for Student Wellbeing, we actually have a whole bunch of programs that just relate to not using alcohol. So we have the Alcohol-Free Fun Fest. We have a safe spring break, which we implement safe practices when going on spring break. And a lot of that involves just knowing how much alcohol you're consuming if you are of age. So we actually have this big cutout in the office, and it's a red Solo cup. And I don't know if y'all know, but you can measure the amount of alcohol you're consuming by the notches that are indicated in a red Solo cup. So we have students actually place numbers that associate to wine, mixed drinks, and just other type of things like that, just so they can be able to identify that whenever they're out in different settings. And this helps with prevention because this students won't be able to overdose on alcohol, or they'll be able to also know the signs of alcohol overdose as well.
Wonderful. And yes, I'm aware of the Solo cup strategy, and it's amazing how I wish we had an image that we can show how it does help individuals, not just students who are underage, but those who are of age as well, understand what is a standard size drink. So, because we do understand that it's important that persons who are of age, who are drinking, it's important for them not only count the number of drinks, but also understand what a standard size drink is, so that we can, or they can, reduce the likelihood of over drinking, which of course puts them at risk for other risk factors such as drinking and driving, alcohol poisoning, and other things that come along with that, unintentional injuries, assaults, etc. And so when we think about strategies to prevent drinking among underage students, would you all say that also applies to students who are of age who may be experiencing problem drinking or high-risk drinking behaviors? And if so, how?
So as far as prevention goes, I think that Tyler touched on it a little bit, the glorification of alcohol on TV and on social media does not help. I think that when it comes to students underage or of age, the feeling of the FOMO, the fear of missing out. My friend is drinking, so I have to drink. And in all reality, like, those statistics are a lot. They're not reality. I think if you were to poll students and ask them what's the percent of your peers you think are drinking, they would think it's a lot higher than what it actually is. I actually saw some sort of study at Princeton on this. I'm not going to cite it because I don't want to get it wrong, but generally the perception is, oh, there are a lot more people drinking than reality. And so I think that letting students know that there are less people drinking than you think. It's just glorified. And as far as prevention goes for me, I think that over the last year, it's been very tough to have motivation to think of the bright side. There has been a lot of crap that has gone on, and getting outside, kind of getting off the phone, because the phone is one of the things that can really, it's not great for mental health. I got rid of my social media for about 4 months. It definitely helped a lot. And just finding reasons to get outside and enjoy nature. Like I think Tyler touched on, the Spartan Recovery Program has hikes, therapeutic hikes. We'll go to parts of Greensboro and just be with other people in recovery, but it doesn't have to be that. Just trying to enjoy life and not sit at home, because life can be, there can be reasons to drink to sit at home. So living a life of activity and being outside can really help with that.
Okay.
Can I add one more thing real quick?
Yes.
I was just going to add that, I think it's really important to increase access to these kind of supports for students that aren't necessarily interested in abstinence. The reality is that not everybody's going to want to be abstinent. And I have found that there's a large disconnect and a gap that should be bridged in order, for those students, because those students still deserve to have fun. They still have, they have a right to have access to those same things that the students that are abstinent have access to. So I think that, kind of bridging that gap would be extremely important as well.
Okay. And so when we think of abstinence, you mean from alcohol, and I'm going to assume you're just speaking of students who are of age. So as opposed to promoting an abstinence-based model for of age students, I'm not going to say harm reduction, but responsible drinking model for addressing high-risk drinking.
Absolutely. Having, a place that students that, are not necessarily in abstinence-based recovery, students that may be in some sort of recovery, a place for them to go that they're also able to do the things that those in, that are a part of an abstinence-based community are able to do.
Okay. Thank you. So I believe there is a question from the chat, Calandra.
Yes, and actually this question is directed to Tiana. And the question is, has there been an influx of students utilizing your services but are online due to COVID and may not return back to campus?
I'm going to answer that based on how I'm interpreting. If I don't answer correctly, Shayna, then let me know. But the way students access me directly is through sanctions and violations with the university. So an influx, I would say probably not, because these are just the students that are on campus right now who are having violations. And again, those numbers, like I told you earlier, have decreased since COVID based on like what the numbers were of sanctions last year. However, the other way to access services like with me directly is like internal referrals through my peers or my colleagues who have students who, are just getting regular therapy for every other issue, and they've seen an increase in their drinking or drug use. So not necessarily an influx there, but virtual services are being accessed through me for students who have drinking concerns, and the ones I have seen, drinking or drug use concerns, the ones I have seen and talked to, most are directly related to COVID things like being bored in the house, academic stressors, things like that, family conflicts, so they're drinking or using more to kind of numb it all out. So I hope that answers the question, but if not, then I'll be glad to elaborate.
And we actually have one more question. I guess anyone can answer this, but what's the best way for parents to secure alcohol in the home?
So I'll start it off. So when we look at best practices as it relates to reducing access to alcohol in the home, several strategies actually surface to the top. All of them include some form of securing the alcohol. And so that may include if you have a bar area, if you have a wine cooler, or a refrigerator that's not part of the general family refrigerator, that you actually use some type of locking system. I know that there are various locks that are available online and through various vendors that allows parents to literally lock those areas where alcohol is kept. Now, of course, if alcohol, such as like a case of beer, whatever, is kept in the general family refrigerator, the family's refrigerator, then of course it's a matter of monitoring your alcohol. I'll just use a personal scenario. I grew up and hung out with my family members, my cousins and things of that nature. And I had an uncle who had a really well-stocked bar. And he was not good with monitoring his alcohol. And so my cousin, who's 4 years younger than myself, at this time we were teenagers, she would access that quite a bit. And so best practices suggest that you actually not just have an open bar at your home. And I understand the mindset that, you know, this is my home, I can do whatever I want. But if you're trying to reduce access, then you try to find ways to lock it. There are also, if you have wine bottles, there are also cork locking systems that are available, that you can literally put the cork in the wine bottle and it will prevent anyone from accessing that. But those are the main things, you know, locking and then monitoring access. If you have 12 beers in the refrigerator, you go to sleep and you wake up and you only have 6, then you may want to consider that, and you have a minor in your home, then you may want to have conversations around reducing that access. The other piece of it is, as a parent, you know, just making sure that your expectations are made clear as it relates to drinking in your home by those who are underage. If you have young people in your home, such as Dr. Luter, who are of age, then also having those conversations and what the expectations are with drinking in the home, because we do know that young people can still engage in high-risk drinking behaviors such as binge drinking, even though they are of age. Would anyone else like to share their thoughts?
I want to add something. Why prevention is so important is because there's a lot of risk factors that we address as preventionists. And so when I go to a high school, there's one particular high school where, or most high schools will have us do the entire 9th grade, because children are at greater risk when they're transitioning, when they're going from one stage of development to the next, especially on a campus or something like that. They want to fit in, they want to belong. So they may just try something that, even though the values of their family have warned them against. Also, their brain is still developing. So when I have this conversation about brain development, I'm amazed at how many people don't realize the brain is still developing until age 25. So that means you could get a 4-year degree and maybe have had a child and got married and still be at the threshold of a fully developed brain. And the more I educate people about this, it's like they can't go back to not knowing. So now they get to make an informed choice, because I have to leave it in their hands that they will, if given the right information, will make a good decision.
Absolutely. So allowing young people and parents, giving them the information to make informed choices, basically.
And I put in the chat a couple of treatment places that Greensboro is known for, you know, addressing substance use or mental health for just adolescents.
So I would like to go back, because I think that Sage, you, Keaton, Tyler, and maybe others alluded to the influence of media, TV, movies, social media. And while you all were talking, it made me think about how in many of our prevention programs, we do, you know, education with middle and high school students about being critical thinkers when it comes to the messaging that they're receiving. And of course, knowing that the brain doesn't fully develop until 25, how can we promote that? Or is that an area of education that needs to be promoted among college students as well? So if we're saying that college students being exposed to social media as well as movies and TV influences their drinking behavior, what strategies should we put in place to address that aspect of their development? Any thoughts? Or is it even worth a strategy to put in place?
I also like what Keaton spoke to about nature, because all of the programs that, which teen treatment in the United States is basically almost non-existent. All the money is really put into adults after the fact.
Right.
But I like what he said, because most teen programs have their whole treatment, a lot of it is around nature. They make sure they go white water rafting, they do all of these different things.
Okay.
So I think it is worth it.
So disconnecting from media, which I think Keaton said earlier that he disconnected for 4 months. Keaton, I tried that same strategy and I was amazed at how well I felt by disconnecting from social media. So, I say that to say that, as it relates to messaging for our underage college age students, it may be, and even those who are of age who may be engaged in high risk drinking behaviors or who are at risk for that, we may want to consider what messaging we're putting before students as it relates to being critical thinkers when it comes to the information that they're digesting, and how that may influence their behaviors and how they can avoid that. How can they avoid being highly influenced by the messaging that they're receiving. And so I believe we are coming close to the end of our panel discussion, but I would like to end on this one question. What suggestions would you make for students who want to enter into recovery during this pandemic? I know we have a couple of students on here who are part of the Collegiate Recovery Program. If you would like to speak to that, what suggestions would you recommend for students who would like to enter into recovery during this very stressful time called COVID-19 pandemic?
I would say just come in with an open mind. Over the last 4 months, I have met people and experienced things that I couldn't really imagine, and living a life that was a lot more fulfilling than before. Coming in with an open mind and just showing up and being in the fellowship of students in recovery. There have been things that really changed my life. So I think it just starts with being open-minded.
I agree. If you would have told me almost 4 years ago that I would be about to graduate college with a really good GPA and possibly going on to an MSW program, myself and a lot of others would have probably laughed. Recovery has given me an amazing life. I'm able to work. I have a family that supports me. I'm able to show up when I need to. So, I would tell those folks to just kind of go for it. And if you stub your toe and you slip up, don't let that, keep you out, keep trying. Recovery is not necessarily linear. It's a continuum and it's a cycle and it's a process. This is not something that I got my first time or my second time or my fourth time or my fifth time. It's definitely been a process, but it has definitely been worth it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tyler. And I will say congratulations on your soon-to-be accomplishment with graduating and possibly entering into a master's program. So I'm excited to hear that for you. So that brings us to the end of our panel discussion. Before I close out in these last 2 minutes of the panel discussion, is there any burning issue or topic that our panelists would like to bring up that we have not addressed over this past hour?
I just want to say, even though like our data speaks to different conclusions with what it looks like right now, I just think, campuses nationwide and stuff, we should be vigilant and prepare for the return and expect numbers to increase once students do come back to campus, because now we have access again, we have social gatherings, we have, that freedom, we have more stress that will be added from going from, Zoom and being able to lay in bed to structure again and going back to class. And we'll also have an increase in mental health symptoms from students who are comfortable being isolated to being put back in social anxiety provoking situations. So I think campuses, programming, things like that, we should be vigilant and prepare for what it's going to look like when students do return, hopefully in the fall. So that's just my last thought.
I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. Absolutely. Anyone else would like to share? Any closing thoughts for the panel? Yes. So there was a comment that says, Tyler and Keaton, thank you for so much for being transparent in your recovery process. So we definitely concur with that. Absolutely. If there are no other questions, do we have any questions or comments that you would like to share from the chat or QA box, Calandra?
No, I think they've all been answered.
Okay. And so actually, I have a question that just actually popped up. I apologize. I know we were closing out, but so I know that, many students are virtual at this point. Are there any resources or supports for students virtually as it relates to counseling supports? And it may be related to alcohol, it may not be, but it may be important for us to highlight what those virtual supports are.
All of the services in the counseling center right now for UNCG are virtual, so they can access, ALD, they can access regular just therapy, group therapy, workshops included. They're all virtual.
Okay.
I just want to echo to that piece about groups, because what I've also found is that students are more interested in participating in group therapy kinds of things from a virtual standpoint, because that sense of isolation. And as I've been listening tonight too, I was just having this curiosity questions about what can we also take from COVID that can help us. It's kind of the good in the sense of which we know, again, I agree with the fact that things are going back to normal, but I'm thinking about, the studies that look at when bars were closed, when students are at home now, they had to spend time with their families. And, when I was thinking about walking through my neighborhood and thinking about how parents and students were all hanging out together. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about how can we take advantage of what we've learned from it, from COVID, from a positive standpoint? Because for example, even at UNCG, we basically created an anonymous reporting form for off-campus gatherings. And we basically, was surprised at the number of students that said, I don't want to go home because the situation may not be good. So I'm going to do everything I can to make sure my peers don't get into those negative behaviors. So I was just kind of sort of thinking about too, as I'm listening, is there are some things that we can take away from this COVID experience that can kind of sort of help inform our efforts as students are returning back.
Absolutely, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that it may not be wise of us to go back to life as normal, right? Because there are so many things that we have and can learn from our experience in the COVID-19 pandemic, from, as you mentioned, the virtual space and students actually liking the group setting in the virtual space. That may be something that can be continued moving forward, right? So a hybrid model when it comes to counseling, as opposed to just being 100% in person or 100% virtual. The anonymous reporting system. So many lessons learned. I agree that although it has been a difficult 12 plus months, that there are many things that we can learn from a technology perspective that can support the work that we do moving forward, whether it's on campus with college age students, and for ADS, if it's off campus for all age groups, including parents, in the work that we do to make our services, our supports more accessible for young people and more enticing or engaging for them to want to engage with us. For me, being a Gen Xer, someone who's straddling pre-technology up to where we are now with social media and internet and things of that nature, I think that we have created so many opportunities that can advance the work that we do as a result of the pandemic. And to go backwards will probably be a disservice for all of us, including those we serve.
Yeah, because if you think about it, we had to be creative when we had to shift. And so how can we carry that creativity when we come back to continue our efforts? So I agree with you on that.
Absolutely. And also getting our student voices involved and helping us frame what that will look like moving forward, right? Because we're doing the work to benefit them. Okay, so thank everyone for joining us in our panel discussion. I think because there are no more questions or comments in the chat box, I am going to turn it over to Jackie Butler, who's the Chief Operating Officer with Alcohol and Drug Services, to do our closing remarks.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Maxwell. I echo thanks to each of you for the gift of your time and your participation. Dr. Carter at the beginning asked us to share our thoughts and listen to each other. And I was struck by how candid and open everyone was to share. And a special thanks to our students who've shared so openly and honestly. Dr. Carter also asked us to be open to the possibilities of how we might be agents of change in whatever role we play in our community. And Angela called it action steps. And I've heard that in our conversations, and that's always good to ground us in what can we do? What are the resources available? And then the final bit of the conversation, I think, directs us or calls us to action, have further conversations. It's absolutely true. What can we learn? And this is such an important topic, underage drinking, how COVID has impacted that has been such a powerful conversation tonight. But at the end, we thought, well, there are some positives too. So how can we continue this conversation? So the call to action is to continue the conversation, to continue to address those ways that it's had a negative impact, are new challenges, the ways that COVID has brought new challenges to us, but also what do we learn and how can we capitalize on that? So again, thanks to each of you. ADS is thrilled to be a partner with in this event tonight, and we look forward to future conversations. Thank you.
So I would reiterate, thank you all for your time. And we just, with that, say have a great evening. And we look forward to great work as it relates to underage drinking moving forward. Good evening, everyone.